I'm Joshua Bardwell, and you're going to learn something today. And boy, howdy, you really are going to learn something today. In a video I released a little while back, I was talking about failsafe, and some of you guys noticed I have a whole lot of functions on my one little aux1. I'm using a single aux channel for arming, angle mode, beeper, turtle mode, and this user one mode, which is what I use with the RealPit board to turn my VTX on and off. How am I getting all of those functions out of just one aux channel? That's what you're going to find out today. And if you have a lot of aux functions and you feel like you're running out of aux channels, this is the video for you. Stay tuned. Let me be straight with you. This is a pretty advanced topic. I'm going to show you how I did what I did, and I hope I'm going to do my best to help you follow along. But I want to acknowledge that some people are going to struggle to keep up, and I'm going to show you what you need to just copy what I've done. But because not all quadcopters are the same, simply copying what I've done isn't going to work for everybody. And it's pretty important that you get this right, because arming and disarming is one of the most fundamental things to get right. But a lot of people are really interested in this, and so I'm going to show you how it's done. Let's get into it. Let's just show you how my switches are set up. And this actually doesn't matter, because you can set your switches up however you like, and what I'm about to show you will work. But some of you guys are going to be interested in how it's set up, so I'll show you. My arming switch is on the upper left and right shoulder. The way that I arm the quad is this switch is the sort of going hot mode. It's a two-stage arming. Pulling this switch arms the quad. So that is disarm and that is arm. For buzzer, I've got buzzer set up on this switch. So basically, if I want to make the buzzer go off while I'm disarmed, I just pull this momentary switch briefly. Commonly use that when I'm like trying to find the quad after a crash. I've got the switch set up so that it only triggers when this switch is in the disarm position, so I don't trigger the buzzer when I'm actually trying to arm the quad. This switch here is used for angle mode and turtle mode. So middle position is angle mode, all the way down is turtle mode, and up is normal function. This switch I use to turn the VTX on and off if I've got a quad with the RealPit on it, and I kind of want this on every quad I build going forward, because it's so nice to be able to turn the video transmitter on and off simply by flicking a switch. Finally, this switch is used for GPS Rescue Mode on quads that have GPS Rescue, which many of them don't, but I've got it right there next to here's my arm disarm, and so it's easy to just kind of hit that one if I need to. So that's how my switches are set up, and they're set up that way on all the quads that I own. I set them up exactly the same way. I think it's really important that your muscle memory be consistent about what functions are where. I don't have voice callouts or anything like that on the individual modes, but that's what works for me. So now let's see how I set that up in the Betaflight Modes tab to get all of these functions on a single aux channel. And this right here is really where the magic happens. This is the hardest thing to do. Setting it up in OpenTX is okay. It's also pretty hard. You got to figure out what functions overlap where and how you can subdivide the channel so that there's a unique channel position for each set of functions that you want to provide. So we'll start right here over on the right hand side of the channel, which is basically everything off. This is the position the channel is going to be in when we're disarmed. We're not in turtle mode. We're not doing where the VTX is not turned on. Everything is disabled, and you can see that nothing is covering this area. The next thing that we've got is let's take a look at the arming mode. We've got the arming mode running from 900 to 1600. And anytime the channel is in that position, the quad will be armed. Now we have to ask ourselves, what functions do we want to have enabled when the quad is armed? Because those functions need to overlap with the arming mode. So you can see right here, angle mode is overlapping with arming mode, because angle and arm have to happen at the same time. But since sometimes we want to be armed without angle mode, we also need a section of the channel where angle is covering it, but arming is not. The same thing is true for turtle mode. When we go into turtle mode, we also need to be armed, but sometimes we want to be armed without turtle mode. So we've got this segment right here. Let's say at a value of 1000, we're armed and angle and turtle mode are off. At a value of 1200, we're armed and turtle mode is on. And at a value of 1500, we're armed and angle mode is on. At a value of 2000, we're disarmed and everything is off. If we take a look at the beeper mode, the beeper I only want to activate when I am disarmed. And the reason I do that is because most of my quads don't have a beeper installed. So I use the motor beeper. Betaflight, if we go over to the configuration tab, in case you didn't know, in the configuration tab right here, beacon tone. Oh, this quad does have a beeper, sorry. Beacon tone right here, if we choose RX set as the D-Shot beacon configuration, and you have to be using D-Shot. If you enable this option, then when you enable the beeper aux mode, the motors will beep, just like when the quad powers up. And that's a great way to have a beeper on quads where you didn't actually bother to install a beeper. This quad happens to have a beeper on it. It's a ready to fly, and it came with one. So you can see I'm not using that. But again, I set my modes up the same on all my quads just for consistency. So in this case, I can trigger the beeper by pulling that momentary switch, and the beeper will activate. But because the beeper does not overlap with the arm mode, I cannot trigger the beeper while I'm armed. Finally, we've got this user 1 mode, and this is the mode that controls the VTX. And you can see I've got this covering the armed situation, but it also extends over here to a value of about 1700, which lets me cover the disarmed situation as well. I want the VTX to be able to be on regardless of when I'm armed or disarmed. See, I need both options. I don't want the VTX to only turn on when I arm the quad because I want to be able to check my video. So you can see that if I flip this switch, now the VTX is on, but we're disarmed. And if I pull the arming mode, now we're armed and the VTX is on. If I only wanted the VTX to be able to be on when I was armed, I could use something like this and just basically make the VTX mode overlap with the arming mode, and that's how that would work. Now, setting this up requires some thought and sometimes some compromises. For example, what if I wanted to be able to make the buzzer work while I was armed? That would be trickier than it would seem. So the simplest thing to do would be to say, well, I'm just going to do this. So now a value of 1550 would be armed and the buzzer would be going. Oh, but do you see the problem with that? Can you see that if the channel was at a value of 1550, I would also be in angle mode? Oops. So then I would need to take angle mode and make it not be there. Okay, now I have a channel position that lets me beep the buzzer and I'm not in angle mode. But what if I was in angle mode? What if I want to beep the buzzer and be in angle mode at the same time? Oh, okay, we can do this. We're going to do this. Now, we have an option that is angle mode and arm and beeper all at the same time. We have an option that is arm and no angle mode and beeper. And we have an option that is beeper and disarm. Okay, hey, that's actually working pretty good. Turtle mode, does that matter? No, I guess it doesn't. Are you gonna ever need to beep the beeper when you're in turtle mode? That probably doesn't. Well, hey, that's fantastic. We just solved this problem. I'm not gonna stick with this setup, but you see how you think it through. You go, I need to have these three things at the same time, and then you find a way to make the channels overlap so that all the possible permutations that you need are there. And I don't know if you guys know this, but I have a degree from Georgia Tech. I'm a hell of an engineer. My degree's in computer science, and I spend a lot of time thinking about permutations and sets and all the different ways that these options can go together. If your brain doesn't work that way naturally, or maybe you haven't practiced a lot, you may struggle with this a little bit, but that's basically how you think about it and how you set it up. The first step to setting this up is to set up the overlapping modes and figure out the channel positions that are going to work to give you the combination of options that you're trying to accomplish. Once you've got your modes tab set up, then you go to the radio and set that up. Here's how. I'm going to hit menu one time. I'm going to hit page to get to the mixer screen. And down here is channel 5, which is my aux 1. And this is where the magic happens. Now, each of these options, you'll notice they're set as colon equals. And colon equals means we've gone, let me long press and edit. We go down here to the multiplex setting, and that's set to replace. Now, normally the way channels work is that each line in the mixer adds to or subtracts from the previous line. That's how you think about these mixer lines when you're working with servos, right? So you can have a trim that maybe makes the flaps go up and down or trims the aileron, and it'll add or subtract the servo position to the stick position. That's not what we're doing here. Basically, what we want to do is, based on the combination of switch positions, simply set the channel to one position. And that's why we're using the replace multiplex mode. What that means is that each line of the mixer will override or replace the lines that came before it with a channel position. So going back out here, we can see that the very first line, I'm called it disarm. You don't have to name your mixer lines, but it does help sort of follow along with what they're trying to do. And the source for this line is max. And what normally the source for a mixer line is a potentiometer or a switch or a stick position. But a max source simply means that we're going to set the channel to a specific value. And in this case, the weight controls the value that the channel is going to be set to. So if I actually modify this weight, take a look at the channel moves. This is the mixer line that's currently active. And as I move the weight up and down, the channel position moves up and down. At a weight of 100, the channel will be at max value of 2000, should be the channel endpoint. And by the way, the trick that I just used where I move the weight here in the radio and I look on screen to see how this little yellow indicator is moving, that's a super useful trick, and I highly recommend you use it to figure out the right weight to put the channel in the exact position that you want it to be in. So we're going to start with this line with a max of 100, and that's the disarm line. And the point is that the default value for the channel should be the disarmed state. When nothing else is going on, the channel should go into the disarmed state. That's pretty important. Now that line is at the top of this list of mixer lines because that is the default state, and everything else we're going to do is going to override it. So as we move down here in the logic, each of these lines is a line that will override what comes before it if it becomes active. And as you think about the order that the lines need to be in, you need to remember that any line that comes further down will override the lines that come above it. So for example, the next line, if we take a look here at the arming line, this is the line that when the switch becomes active, arms the quad. So here I've now armed the quad. This line is bold, and that's indicating that it is active. But you'll notice I've got the angle line after it. And the reason for that is that when we go into angle mode, we're going to add to arming mode. So if I switch to angle, that becomes active and it overrides and replaces. We can have arm without angle, but we can never have angle without arm. And that means that arm needs to be above angle in the list. This line that I've got labeled option, that's actually turtle mode. I don't know why I called it option. You'll notice that angle and option are together in the list. Both of them come after the arming mode because again, I can have turtle mode and arm. Turtle mode always comes with arm, but arm never comes without turtle mode. It doesn't actually matter the order that the angle mode and turtle mode go in here in the list because there will never be a case when both of them are active at the same time. So it never matters which one. One of them is never going to override the other. Likewise, you'll see that the buzzer option comes before the arming option because when I'm armed, I'm never going to activate the buzzer. so the arming will always override the buzzer. If I pull the switch to activate the buzzer mode, it activates, but if I were armed, it would override that. Up here at the very top, we've got the VTX option, and that may seem contradictory to what I just said. The VTX is always going to be active when everything else is active, right? So why do we have these other things overriding the VTX? And the reason for that is because of the way we set up the VTX mode, whenever we go into any of the other modes, that the VTX will always be active. So the fact that we've activated the arming line, hang on, we've activated the arming line, and now the channel is in position 1000. Well, that's not just arming. Because of the way we set up the modes, it is also always going to enable the VTX. So in that case, we've combined these functions. This mixer line not only arms the quad, but it also activates the VTX because of the way we set up the modes. Now, normally what we do when we set up switch-based aux modes is we use the switch as the source for the mixer line. So if we go to this VTX option here and we edit it, normally we would have the source right here. The switch would be the source, but we're not doing that because we're using max as the source to cause the channel to go to a specific fixed value. In order to tie the switch and the aux mode together, what we do is we go down here where it says switch, and this option causes the mixer line to only be active when the switch is in a given position. So basically these mixer lines say when the switch is in the desired position, force the channel to this fixed value. And we can accomplish that just by clicking once on enter to cause it to blink. We move the switch one time into the desired position, and that causes it to automatically read whatever switch position we used. But you'll notice that many of these mixer lines are not based on a physical switch. Look right here. This one is based on L10. What does that mean? What is L10? If we press the page key a few times, we go to the logical switches screen. And logical switches are used to build more complex logic around than just, oh, if the switch is in a given position, then whoop, just go. So if we look at what L10 is, we can see L10 is saying only become true when switch SH is in the up position and switch SF is in, or sorry, the down position, and switch SF is in the down position. Let's see what that really means. Switch SH is in the down position and switch SF is in the down position. There we go. So switch SH down position is this one, and switch SF down position is this one. In other words, what we're saying here is only activate the buzzer, that's this one, when the arming switch is in the disarm position. That's how we accomplish that logic. We don't try and buzz the buzzer when the quad could be armed. These other ones, L08 and L09, are similar. Logical switch L04 is the switch that determines whether the quad is armed or not. That goes back to the two-stage switch arming. So if we look up here, these first four lines here relate to the two-stage switch arming. For example, switch LO2 is used to confirm that the throttle is all the way down. And these other ones, well, you can go watch my video on two-stage switch arming. I'll put a link in the video description. But you'll notice that when I arm the quad, switch LO4 becomes active. And when I disarm, switch LO4 becomes inactive. So these other lines here, LO8 and LO9, are confirming that this function will only be active when the quad is actually in the armed state. What's the purpose of this? Well, take a look what switch SD does. Switch SD is causing the quad to go into angle mode or turtle mode. But notice that those modes also combine with arming. If we didn't have this check, logical switches LO8 and LO9, then simply flipping this switch would cause the channel to move and cause the quad to immediately arm and be in angle mode, or immediately arm and be in turtle mode. You may want that. You may want to be able to immediately flip into turtle mode and arm the quad. But be careful, because if you do that and then you flip this switch, the quad is now armed and could, so I don't like that. I only want the quad to arm via the two-stage switch arming, and then any other functions that require the quad to be armed depend through the logical switches on that already being set. If what I just said kind of blew through your, in one ear and out the other, stop. This is a big safety concern. because if you don't understand how to use logical switches to not to prevent the quad from accidentally arming when you didn't intend it to, you're going to get yourself in trouble here. Before you take this live, I strongly recommend you give it a big safety check on the bench with props off. Make sure that, like, when you arm, the quad arms, but that no other combination of switches causes it to arm unintentionally. Okay? Again, you never want to accidentally arm the quad when you didn't mean to. You can hurt yourself. Well, there you go. Are you still with me? Congratulations. If you are, then you're a giant OpenTX Betaflight nerd just like me. I'm going to put a link to my my Taranis OTX file. That means you in OpenTX Companion, you can actually open this file and you can look at my exact transmitter setup. Don't think that you're just going to be able to copy it and have it work. Let's see, it's going to be this model. Because your quad is different than mine. Unless your quad is identical to mine and your radio is identical to mine, then that's not going to work. But here it is. You can see exactly how I've got it set up. Pay attention to the arming channel and pay attention to the logical switches. That's the key. And then good luck. And if you have trouble, ask in the comments. I'll do my best to help. But again, it's very difficult for me to troubleshoot why your radio isn't exactly working, because there's just so much that could be different about your radio and how it's set up. But I'll do my best. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hey, since you're still here, if this video taught you something that you didn't already know, can I please remind you that I have a Patreon, which you're more than welcome to join. Link is down in the video description. If you throw me $1 or $2 a month or maybe more, that's super helpful. As you probably already know, this is my full-time job. This is how I pay the rent and put food on the table, and it means a lot to me. If I helped you learn something, if I saved you a little bit of time, if I saved you a little bit of money, then throw a little bit of that back my way by becoming a patron, or use my affiliate links. Affiliate links down in the video description, not for this product because there's no products here, but in general, click one of those affiliate links before you make any purchase, and I get a little bit of a percentage. Thank you so much. Happy flying.